Tenemos experiencias compartidas.
We have shared experiences,
Y durante mucho tiempo hemos hablado de esas experiencias
and
compartidas.
for some time we have discussed these
Ahora, esas
experiences.
experiencias compartidas deben metamorfosearse,
Now these shared experiences
deben traducirse
must be translated
en expresiones compartidas.
into
Y esas
shared
expresiones,
experiences, and these
que
expressions,
cosas se hagan
so
en el
things
mundo
can be
real,
achieved in the
de la
real world
producción, de la creación, tenemos
when
que
producing and
obtener las
creating.
instituciones adecuadas,
We
que
must
se
have
parezcan a nosotros,
to build the
que se
correct
hagan bajo el prisma de
institutions
nuestros propios ojos.
created on their own
Hay estados
agenda.
que están tomando el liderazgo, pero tenemos que involucrar a todas
There are
las
some that
poblaciones, a todas las
taking the lead, but
sociedades. Y como ya señalé,
we have to involve.
tenemos que unir e integrar nuestras civilizaciones latinoamericanas.
We have to build and integrate our civilizations in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Si analizamos esta sala,
If we look around this room,
si mantenemos nuestros ojos abiertos,
if we keep
a
our
veces
eyes
uno ora con los
open,
ojos cerrados, pero también lo puede hacer con los ojos abiertos. Usted se percata
you
de
can
que
realize
nuestro
that
Caribe,
the Caribbean
América Latina,
and Latin America,
o como dice Martí, nuestra
and
América,
as Jose Marti said, our America,
metafóricamente, somos como una
we are
sinfonía.
like a symphony.
Somos las canciones de nuestros pueblos,
We are the sounds of our indigenous people.
los Calinago, los Garifuna. Somos la melodía de Europa,
We are the melody of Europe
con el ritmo de África.
and with the rhythm of Africa.
Tenemos las danzas de Asia,
We have
y
the
tenemos
dances of
nuestras,
Asia
propias canciones,
and our own
nuestra
songs.
propia música, y eso
Our own
hace
music.
esta sinfonía. Y como todas las
This
sinfonías, de vez en cuando,
make up this symphony.
hay
And as every symphony,
disonancias.
from time to time,
Y las disonancias en
there are
nuestra
dissonances,
sinfonía
and
metafórica, que son las civilizaciones caribeñas de América Latina,
which are the Latin American
es
and
que
the Caribbean
esto se debe al
civilizations,
genio de nuestros pueblos,
this is due to the genius of our people
resolver estas disonancias
that have managed to solve
a
these
través de formas
differences
culturales, a través
through
del comportamiento
culture
diario
and
y cambios.
everyday behavior and changes in our behavior.
La manera de resolver estas
The way to
disonancias,
resolve these differences,
esas maneras han tomado formas culturales de
these have
comportamiento
taken,
variadas. Se reflejan en los cortes, en los parlamentos,
and is reflected
en los
in
tribunales,
parliaments
y
and
son ahí, es allí
in
donde
the
se
courts, and
resuelven
it
las
is
disonancias
where these differences are resolved in an effective way.
de nuestras civilizaciones.
When integrating our civilizations,
Debemos garantizar que la
we have to
integración
ensure that integration
sea orgánica y no
it's
mecanicista.
organic and our mechanics.
Cuando tenemos una integración orgánica,
When we have an organic integration,
las debilidades y fortalezas relativas
the weakness and strength,
de las unidades individuales,
the individual units,
estas se disuelven
these are dissolved
en su totalidad en un
in
todo,
just as a whole,
de manera tal que surge algo
that
distinto,
something new will rise, something different,
distinto, diferente, que es mejor,
something that
que
is
es
better,
mejor que las partes individuales.
that is better than the individual parts.
Bien, esto es un proceso.
But this is a process.
Esto no va a ocurrir de la
This is
noche
not
a la
going to
mañana.
happen overnight,
Cuando usted calienta el agua
because when you heat water
en su cocina, toma ciertos
in your
minutos
kitchen, it takes several
antes de
minutes
que esa agua se transforme en
until
vapor.
this water is transformed in.
Proceso.
It is a
Los
process,
procesos
and
sociales
that's why
políticos
social and political process
toman más tiempo.
takes longer.
La
In the midst of contradictions,
accidentes, el paralelograma de fuerzas, esta
these
constelación
constellations
de factores en este
of
proceso
factors and in this process, in this solidarity and unity process,
no permitimos que otros
we do not allow that others
definan por nosotros
can define for us
cuáles son las soluciones.
what our solution must be,
Incluso si podemos tomar prestado de
even
otras
if we can borrow from other civilizations, other contexts,
adaptar
and we can adapt
parece propicio
what we
para
can see
nosotros.
fit for us.
Siempre tratamos de buscar
We always
soluciones
try
a
to find
nuestros desafíos y
solutions
abordarlos
to
con
solve
estas soluciones
our
con
problems
los prismas que corresponden a nuestros
with the
ojos
correspondent
y a través de la solidaridad,
and
porque
throughout solidarity,
sin la solidaridad
because
no
without
vamos a ir a
this,
ninguna parte.
we won't get anywhere.
Bolívar nos lo enseñó,
Bolivar taught us this,
José Martí también lo hizo,
as well as Jose Marti,
y otros líderes contemporáneos
and several other
de
leaders
todos los ámbitos nos los han enseñado.
have taught us this.
La CELAC se originó
CELAC was created,
para aquellos que son jóvenes.
for those who are very young and don't know this,
La idea de la CELAC
the idea of CELAC
no solamente surgió
didn't arise
en el siglo
in the
XXI, hay una
21st
larga
century.
historia.
There is a long history
Desde los padres fundadores,
from the founding fathers,
movimientos,
from the independent movements in the Caribbean and in Latin America,
pero surgió una conjunción de
but
factores
an important conjunction arose
del siglo XXI.
at the beginning of the 21st century.
¿Ustedes recuerdan que fue el momento
You remember that was the
que
moment
hubo un triunfo de un tipo de producción,
a particular
vida,
a triumph of a particular way of life.
Estados Unidos de
This
América?
triumph was that the United States of America gave us.
Todos vamos a ser como Estados
We'll
Unidos,
be like,
decía Francia
we all be like the United States.
que habló del fin de la historia. Por un tiempo, luego del
And there was, for a while,
de las economías
after the
de
collapse
planificación centralizada,
of the centralized economy that was called communism,
surgió una unipolaridad.
and there was unipolarity.
El mundo no le gustaba
The people
mucho
around the
esa idea,
world
incluso la gente de
didn't
América
like this idea, even in Latin America.
nos dijimos,
And that's why we
"Hagamos
said,
cosas juntos".
why we don't do more things together.
Por ello, en 2008,
That's why in 28, President Lula gathered all of us,
Chávez,
including former President
en
Chavez,
una ciudad conocida, la de Bahía,
in Bahia,
y esas personas lideraban sus países.
these people were the leaders of their own countries.
Estaban en Bahía. Lula y Ralph también estuvo allí,
I was also there
porque yo he estado allí,
because I have been present
continuo allí.
there
22
since
Bueno, Lula se
over
agarró un
22
año
years.
sabático. Un descanso se tomó Lula,
Well, Lula took a sabbatic year,
pero ya regresó.
but he's back.
Y estábamos hablando de
When we were discussing about the rebirth of CELAC and the thrill that this created.
Esto no es algo foráneo. Uno de los grandes
This is-
escritores
This is nothing strange. One of the greatest writers from the Caribbean and Latin America,
un premio Nobel de México,
a Nobel Prize from Mexico, Octavio Paz,
en uno de sus famosos poemas,
in one of his most famous poems,
dice que la base negra
he said the black stalk,
creció,
it grew
se deterioró y volvió a resurgir.
and rebirth again.
CELAC
But in this case, Selak
se quedó un poco
was
rezagada,
was
pero
born.
volvió a resurgir.
It was left behind a little while and then rebirth again.
Entonces, Nicolás,
So
vamos a los límites de nuestras posibilidades.
we are going to until the limits of our
Y
possibilities,
estamos enfrentando
and we are
elementos sin límites.
fighting
Los elementos no tienen límites para nosotros.
unlimited elements.
Y debemos llegar entonces a un momento
And we must raise the stage where
América Latina y
Latin America and the Caribbean,
civilizaciones van a ser
our civilization, must be
este va a ser
ours.
nuestro hogar de todos.
This will be our home,
No va a ser un lugar específico,
everybody's
ese
home.
hogar. Ese hogar,
It won't be a specific home.
una condición
This
irrevocable
home
de la
will be
mente,
an irrevocable condition of the mind,
de nuestra mente.
of our mind.
Debe ser un eco en nuestra sangre, en nuestros
Must be
huesos.
a reflection of our bones and our heart.
Y debemos tener esas
We must have these experiences
metamorfoseen en instituciones.
that must turn into institutions.
Intentos en este sentido,
There have been several
pero tenemos que
chances in this sense, but we must build the basis, the institutions within CELAC.
yo apoyo fuertemente
That's why I
de una
support
secretaría
very
permanente
strongly
de la CELAC.
of a permanent secretary of
Muchos de
CELAC.
los países representados en la CELAC,
Many of the countries that are represented in this
una
organization,
total unanimidad, excepto por
and I think unanimously,
que todavía tiene que ser persuadido en la materia.
except for a few countries that must be persuaded,
Pero a menos que tengamos una base
but
institucional
unless we create a base,
que nos
a
ayude
clear institutional base
nuestro trabajo,
that help us to strengthen our work,
comparativa de nuestras experiencias
that is
vividas,
a shared experience,
siempre vamos a estar en rezago.
we will always be left behind.
Por ejemplo, hay un tema
For example, there is a
de
subject
nuestra gente.
that remains in the back of the mind of our people.
Dice, si hacemos esto,
There are some that say, if we do this,
reemplazar a la OEA. No,
CELAC will replace.
no es la OEA. Tiene otro propósito y otra función.
This organization has other purposes and other functions different from CELAC.
Y la CELAC nos une
And CELAC unites Latin America and the Caribbean.
a nuestras familias.
It unites our families.
No podemos.
We cannot ignore
La
the presence of the United States.
que lo haga
If we do so,
se está sumergiendo en una fantasía.
we can incurse in these infantile fantasies.
Estamos acá geográficamente. No
We are
podemos
here
actuar.
geographically. We cannot move from here.
Relaciones con Estados Unidos.
And we must have relations with the United States.
Ha habido en el planeta.
It's one of the strongest countries in the world. But now, this doesn't mean
Que tenemos que acostarnos y hacernos
that we have to play that because the United States is the most powerful country in the world.
que de manera
We must engage in proper ways
un acomodo donde
to
sea posible
achieve where it's possible
resistir de manera creativa
and to resist in creative ways,
y hacerlo
and to do so in a mature manner,
de una manera que refleje
in a way that
nuestra
reflects
característica y nuestra condición de adultos, porque ya llegamos
our
a la edad
characteristic
adulta.
and
Este es el telón de fondo. Un poco para explicar lo
this is
que
a little bit to
hemos
explain
hecho desde que
what we have
empezamos
done
nuestra
since
presidencia, porque
our presidency began. in January.
Hemos tenido muchas reuniones.
We held several meetings.
Me dice que yo he escrito más cartas
President Nicolás Maduro
de
said that
Estado y de
I have
gobierno
written more letters to heads of
que
state and government
ningún otro presidente
than
por
any
dentro
other
de la CELAC.
president
A
of
veces
SALAC
digo que
before.
tengo que escribir más,
And I said sometimes that I
pero
have to write more,
a veces me digo, pero ¿por qué Ralph
and sometimes
escribe tantas cartas tan a
I say
menudo?
why I write so many letters so often.
Pero lo que hemos hecho,
But what we have done as a small country,
que por primera vez
that for the first time,
país de habla inglesa del
an
Caribe
English-speaking country from the Caribbean is presiding this organization.
pero nosotros prometimos
But we
que íbamos a hacer
promised
nuestro trabajo
that we would do our work
de manera colegiada
in an
incluyente.
inclusive way.
Muy bien. Hemos tenido reuniones
And in this matter, we
con
we
los de
held several meetings with the finance minister in Chile.
Hubo una reunión con ministros.
We held a meeting from environmental ministers in Costa Rica.
Va a haber una reunión en México.
There's going to be a meeting in Mexico between foreign ministers. We are preparing this meeting.
Una reunión sobre
We are going to be
la
There's going to be a meeting
seguridad en
regarding
Guyana,
food security in Guyana.
ciencia y tecnología.
This meeting regarding science and technology in Venezuela.
Y debemos ahora
And we must
concluir.
conclude.
Entiendo, según lo que me dijo
I understand that
la tarde,
what
luego
I've
10
been
días
told,
en África, en París,
that after 10 days in Africa, Paris, and London,
pero Nicolás me ordenó que estuviera aquí hoy.
but President Nicolás Maduro asked me to be here today.
Apenas me cambié la ropa ayer.
I just changed my clothes yesterday and I came here.
Esta noche.
And I go to Saint Vincent and the Grenadines this
Tormenta tropical que nos ha
evening.
afectado.
There's a tropical storm that hit us,
Llego ahí a atender a mi
and I must go there and attend my people who has been affected by this storm.
Estamos trabajando
We are working,
como se me dijo anoche,
as I have been
para
advised,
lograr un acuerdo
to create an agreement
acerca de a qué país le corresponde
about
la presidencia
which
pro
country
tempore
corresponds
de
the pro-temporary presidency of CELAC in 2025.
propuesto una fórmula.
I made a proposal.
Nosotros hemos trabajado de manera estructural,
We have been working in a structural manner,
tratando de crear esta secretaría.
but we are trying to create this.
En todos estos temas tenemos un mandato.
In all these topics, we have a mandate, that we must to obey.
El próximo mes
Next month, we have a very important meeting,
muy importante con la Unión
a very important summit with the European Union
17 y 18 de julio.
on July 17 and 18th.
Ustedes ya han visto esta declaración.
And I'm sure you have seen this draft.
Pero como dicen
It is not easy,
los evangélicos en
but
Perú,
as Evangelica says, we hope that God help us.
poco a poco llegaremos a un acuerdo.
We will get to an agreement.
Y tenemos reuniones con la Unión Africana.
And we have meetings with the African Union that has been
Importante culminar
that is important to finish this
de
this
los
meeting
países que han sido presidentes pro
with
tempore,
countries that have held the presidency, like Argentina,
pues, que debe reunirse de los países que han
and all these countries that have
recientemente.
led this organization recently.
Queremos gobernar siguiendo sus
And we want to rule following your instructions, and that's why we are working with the African Union,
con la Liga Árabe,
with the Arab League,
la civilización de China,
with China,
Oriente,
and the Middle East, with Russia, with the United States. We are going to meet with all of them. The United States, and I want to illustrate this subject. In CELAC, we have CELAC, and we have the Summit of the Americas. A critical issue that must be discussed in Latin America and the Caribbean is migration. For example, in Los Angeles, they met, but they didn't invite neither Cuba, Venezuela, nor Nicaragua. And they discussed the migration issue. The president of Honduras was not present. And it is a very important country when you want to discuss migration. And this was because the exclusion of 3 of our brotherly nations. But we have to discuss with the U.S. about migration. We also have to talk to them about matters that we want to control. For example, Mexico wants a space station. We have to discuss this issue. Why in space, and these are elemental issues for countries. We know there will be future pandemics. We need to regulate medical and pharmaceutical agencies in the area. That's why Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, they have pharmaceutical industries. But you have to wait for the FDA approval. That gives you the approval. We must create our own agency. We must share common experiences. It must be shown in shared experiences, not spoken words, but rather institutions, so we can achieve important things. We need to work together in science and technology for the reasons that President Nicolás Maduro already discussed. If we are going to coordinate this, we need an institution that coordinates other similar institutions. The world has a body of knowledge. That it doesn't mean that if we create an institution, it means that we are going to isolate scientific knowledge. This is against what we want to do. But we must do what we need to do to defend our own interests and according to our own intentions. All civilizations historically, since commercial agriculture began, applied science and technology was used. And these elements as being key for the evolution of the civilization, and we must do the same here. I think you get the general idea about what we want to do. There's a lot of work to do, I know this. I don't want to take any more of your time. But I would like to end this speech saying that we have an abundance of writers in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I would like to finish with a US poet, Robert Frost. And I shall be saying this with to all different people, and I choose less difficult. We must choose the less walked path, and this would we mean anything for unity and independence of our nations in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is the message I bring to Caracas. And from this, we will make possible that science and technology can straighten, that there is an instruction and an institute that arises from this agenda for good planning. We have plenty of resources among our countries. There are some countries that can provide more resources than others, but everyone will make a contribution. And when we begin to discuss which one is going to contribute, it must be resolved. Because I defend the Aristotle's principle that equality and proportions must be in relation with our capacities. But first, we must have clarity regarding about what we want to do. What we cannot do is to violate our future. And if we do so, we must know the present is the past, and the past has sometimes been the result of the mistake of our fathers. And we must add something new so there's no mistakes that we bring to the future. What do we have to do so as to not jeopardize our future? We must talk to our forefathers, with our sons and daughters, with the aim of and throughout time to create something solid. And everyone that is here today, we know that the fever in our history had made us to achieve commitments. Those who don't want to understand that biology is part of history, you will always need to get middle ground, a commitment. And with this, we can understand what is the real objective. Is to achieve concrete results for everyone. But if we create a commitment, we must stand firm with our principles. that is part of unity and solidarity in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.